Welcome to Unbuckled Comics. If you're new, welcome. There's a liability form on the back table next to a How to Cope with Arachnophobia guide. Actually, on second thought, if you have arachnophobia, you might want to skip this episode. If you are returning and you have arachnophobia, you might want to skip this episode, but otherwise, thank you for your continued support. I am Unbuckled Kate, your host of this comic book reviewing podcast, and today we are taking a look at Venom Volume 1, but this is the Flash Thompson Venom, so I like to call it Agent Venom Volume 1. Makes a little bit more sense, a little less confusing. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but before we head out on patrol, let's gather some intel first. And hey, look, pay attention because I got a new spiel for you. I have a link tree, linktr.ee backslash unbuckled comics. If you go over there, you will see the links to all of my social medias, including my YouTube, which it has been probably a little over a week since I put up a video on there. But you should be able to listen to new episodes over there. They have my RSS link, and they should be getting pushed to YouTube Music automatically now. Aside from that, there is a link to a Patreon. Listen very carefully. Don't sign up for my Patreon. Do not do it. July 1, I am shutting the thing down. Patreon for Unbuckled Comics is going away as of July 1. I already have an episode recorded for June. I wanted to give everyone a heads up that it was coming so they could cancel their subscriptions as they wanted. It's just as of right now, it is just a little bit too much work for me, and with the two boys and adjusting to that, and Mrs. Cape is going back to work very very soon. So just know that Unbuckled Comics Patreon is going away, but have no fear. If you are a Cape Crusader, you're always going to be my Cape Crusader. Things that are changing with the show. I want to talk about them a little bit before we get into the episode. Number one is actually, let me pull it up here on my phone to see if I made that post yet. I believe I did. And you're not going to believe this, I didn't. Okay, so let me go over here where I know I have it pulled up, or I know I have access to it. Ah, screw it. I know what I'm saying. So basically, the solicitation episode that you get, it's the first Thursday after the first episode of the month. I know that's kind of confusing. That's just the way it worked out best for me. That is going away completely and totally. There will be no more solicitation episodes. And to be honest, I breathe a sigh of relief with that. Those are the ones that I do not enjoy doing, but I always felt like I needed a newsy type thing thrown into my podcast. It won't be there anymore. Just not doing it. So what I will do in place of maybe at the end of like my intros to the episodes where I talk about what I'm doing, maybe I'll just tell you what polls I personally am getting, or maybe just give you an unbuckled pick of the month or pick of the week or something. I'm still gonna give you comics that are coming in. I just won't be going through the seven main publishers and giving you every single new thing coming out. Um, haven't quite figured it out, but also in the Discord, the Unbuckled Comics Discord, I have a channel called Sneak a Peek. I will start posting a lot more in there on things that are coming up because for me, am still going to be looking through the solicitation. So this will be a much quicker way. I don't have to rewrite the summaries of these things and pricings and stuff. I can just copy the link to it or take a screenshot of it and post it in the Discord, and then there it is. Speaking of Discord, one of my plans is to, in fact, make that a boy, lost my train of thought. Make it public. Make it so that you don't need an invite, and then hook it up to the link tree so that you can go over there and just join willy nilly. Haven't really had time to look at it yet, but I will figure that out by the time that Patreon ends. As far as Patreon episodes go, I do plan on releasing some of them over time. Not all of them. I won't release any of the solicitation episodes. They are not relevant. But in July, right before, I'm thinking the week before Deadpool Wolverine comes out, I have an episode that I talk about the MCU in general and why I don't think Deadpool Wolverine will save it. I will, be releasing that one. There's a couple other ones. The one that we are getting this coming month, this month in June, the last Unbuckled and Unscripted. That's one that I so far really like and really would like to release, but I think I'm gonna hang on to it just for a little bit longer. I don't want people to pay for it and then end up me releasing it right as they pay for it. That feels really wrong. I might hang on to it for like a year or wait till something comes up where I just need a week break and I can just drop it, something like that. So there are a couple episodes that I plan on releasing that were Patreon exclusives. And then, maybe down the line, things will change. The boys will get a little bit older, a little more sufficient, and I'll be able to reopen the Patreon. But I don't as of right now, I don't see that happening. So, for those of you that have been a part of Patreon, and I started the Patreon, I believe, in October. It was either October or November. We've done however many months that is, and most of you were there from the very beginning. I can't thank you guys enough for doing that, for being there, for, you know, supporting me with more than just your ears, as I say. On our Unbuckled and Unscripted and solicitation episodes. It was wild to go around and tell people I do a podcast and I have people that pay for my podcast. Not that I still, I could say that people would pay for it if I had it because, people are now, but regardless of that, I appreciate it so much. It's just a little bit too taxing on myself and my family, especially with the Hershey Comic Con coming up. I find it more valuable for me to to place priority on those interviews and things for the Hershey Comic Con than on the Patreon, and that's really was the tipping point. Was it just got to be a little bit too much where I was worried about my, normal week to week Unbuckled comic show, and then my Patreon 2 month, and the solicitations episode takes forever to write. It feels like. And, Unbuckled and Unscripted, I was organizing with two other people to get the June one ready, which, in case you're wondering, is a review of Batman 1989 movie. And I'm doing it with Chris and E. Period, uh, guests that have been on the show before. They are brothers, if you did not know that. So we have Chris, who was 10 years old when it came out, E. Period, who was like 3, and I was not born when it came out. So we have three different generational views of that movie, and the discussion was a lot of fun. We actually sat down and watched the movie together. So doing all of that kind of organizing for that, and then turning around and organizing getting interview done and edited for those and all that stuff. It was just a little bit too much this last month and a half or so. So I decided to cut Patreon out and be able to keep doing my week to week Unbuckled comics as well as anything that pops up where I might be able to do interviews for Comic Cons like Hershey Comic Con. Speaking of Hershey Comic Con, June 11th, which is next week, is going to be the next interview for that. And I sat down with Mr. Keith Williams, who is also an anchor, much like Bob Alman. If you had not listened to the Bob Alman episode, you can go back 2 weeks, I think it was, that we did that and check that one out. Bob is a great guy and the founder of the Inkwell Awards. Keith Williams has been in the business a very long time. He joined Marvel, I believe, in '82. I have the year right in the interview. I'm just going off the top of my head. I believe he joined Marvel in 1982 and was doing multiple stuff over the years of that. And he was there for Web of Spider-Man, and we actually didn't even talk about it in the interview with him. He and I were chatting afterwards, and the really famous panel of Spider-Man ripping the symbiote suit off of him in the bell tower. That was, Keith Williams did some work on that. I mean, he was part of the bringing that to life, which is really cool. And I wish we would have had that in the interview, but um, it was a great interview. I thank Keith for coming on the show, and we have him, and then before the Hershey Comic Con, we have DG Chichester left to go. So, still really busy around here. And the only other thing that I plan on changing is the Unbuckled tournament. All right. So this week we had, no, not Venom. We had Green Goblin versus Dr. Octopus in the last semifinals. Venom is already set up into the finals. And we had Storm Beagle right in, and he said, "Go, Potato Man, go." Doc Ock for the win. Uh, well, Storm Beagle, it was Doc Ock for the lose. The pumpkin slinging Green Goblin takes out Potato Man with, multiple vines coming off of him. That was a horrible analogy. But Green Goblin wins 75% to 25% in this voting, setting up a championship round of Venom and Green Goblin. Venom, Spider-Man rejected the alien. Parker exposed the man. They have combined to make an enemy that even Spidey fears. And then Green Goblin, father of Parker's best friend and killer of his girlfriend. They set up probably the most perfect, the best Spider-Man villain finals there could have been. And I typically don't say that, but as I hinted just, a few seconds ago, I'm changing up this unbuckled tournament. Instead of me doing a in-depth episode where I tell you the way I voted and we go over it, next week when we have our winner and one character is already out to a lead. But next week, when we have our winner between Venom and Green Goblin, I'm going to tell you what we had different right away. I'm going to tell you who I had winning. And then, whenever I get to a point where I need an episode, the winner of this will get their very own case file episode. If you remember back in September, I did a case file on Batman where I talked about the best selling comic book issue with him in it, who had the longest run. We talked about the creators. We looked at TV shows with Batman in it. We looked at movies, and we are going to do the exact same thing with Venom. And from here on out, when we do an unbuckled tournament, the winner of the unbuckled tournaments will be getting their own case file episodes. I think it's a good idea for me. I think it is more interesting for the winners, puts a little bit more on the table other than me sitting down and going over a bracket and, you know how you voted. And I could just tell you real quick, hey, I disagree with this one, that one, or the other one. Uh, so we're going to condense that a little bit. I'll do it in the intro. And then eventually I'm thinking of maybe just doing 2 a year, but making it bigger groups again, like we had at the beginning, having maybe 16 characters again or something like that. Probably not 32, that's way too big, but anyway, you get my point. Maybe doing a 16 character tournament, and then the winner of said tournament will get their own case file episode. Our inaugural tournament, unbuckled tournament winner for the case file episode will be chosen by this time next week, and it's going to be between Venom and Green Goblin. Well, all right. I don't really have anything else to add to this intro, so without further ado, let's get to the review, or the part one review, rather, of Venom Volume 1. So, buying Venom Volume 1 was a little bit of a mistake. I bought it completely and totally based off of the cover, and the cover has Venom, but not Agent Venom. So, I was a little bit disappointed, not terribly disappointed, but still a little disappointed when I started reading it and was like, oh, this is Flash Thompson with the Venom suit, and he's a double amputee war veteran, and he has the symbiote suit, and he is now an agent for the government, codenamed Agent Venom. Definitely threw me for a loop, but it ended up being a really, really cool story. It's a great Flash story aside from a Venom story. Definitely not the Venom you think it is. But let's take a look. This is the Volume 1 Complete Edition, so it is a thick boy, which means we are doing 2 episodes for this. So this one now, and then next week you're going to hear me finish out the remainder of it, and I believe it's 6 and 6. I know this first episode is 6, but the second part might be 7, because I think there's like an annual or a special thrown in there. The list of writers and artists is lengthier than normal because it was such a big book. So we start off with Rick Remender. Deadly Class is his big story. Uncanny X-Force, The Punisher, Booster Gold. The other writer is Lan Medding, Aquaman and the Others, Fables, The Punisher, Cable and Deadpool, Black Panther, and the Agents of Wakanda. Artist Tim Fowler, Books of Magic, Green Arrow, Doom Patrol, The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, Squirrel Girl. I have a hard time saying that for some reason. And Howard the Duck. Another artist, Toby Moore, The Walking Dead, The Exterminators. I'm trying to think The Exterminators. What was... Yeah, anyway. Stephen O. Castile. Lost my place. X-Men Red and Secret Warriors. Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped. I'm sorry. It's Tony Moore, The Walking Dead, Exterminators, Fear Agent, Deadpool, Invincible, The Punisher. Then Stefano Castile, The Amazing Spider-Man, X-Men Red, Secret Wars, Ultimate Black Panther, and Ironheart. For some reason, I'm looking at The Amazing Spider-Man because I abbreviated it, but I put a T in the abbreviation, and for some reason that kept throwing me off. Okay, the last artist we have is Sean Mall, 52, which was part of the New 52 of DC. Wildcats, She-Hulk, Green Lantern, Nightwing, and Venom/Deadpool What If. Now, remember I said about the 6... I forgot about this one, and I have it written down, and, go me, I was prepared for this. Venom/Deadpool What If is at the end of this trade as, like, the bonus one-shot thrown in at the end. So we might talk about it. We'll see how long that episode goes. But for now, we're going to talk about the first 6 issues of this, and it starts with, like I said, Flash is a double amputee war hero that the U.S. government has possession of the symbiote suit that was once Venom, and they attach it to Flash. The caveat here is he can only be in the suit for 24 hours. If he is in it for longer than 24 hours, the suit starts to permanently bond to him, and then even if they are separated, like, the suit needs him and he needs the suit after that. To make sure that he doesn't go rogue, they also implant him with a, I think they call it a failsafe, but it's a bomb. They put a little nano bomb in him somewhere so that they can hit a switch and blow him up and, gather up the suit. And at some point throughout the story, they do hint that there was another wearer that was Agent Venom that they did have to kill. So anyway, we join in on this story somewhere in Eastern Europe where Jack O'Lantern is his name, a villain that I don't know much about. I definitely didn't know anything of him before this story, but I really like this guy. He is a great villain he's a perfect antagonist to Flash Thompson's protagonist, and we're going to talk about that a little bit here. But he's terrorizing a small village to showcase the weapons that he and someone else, his superior, is planning on selling. And these weapons are made from a vibranium found somewhere else in the world, and they shoot through everything. So, like, as he's terrorizing this village, a bunch of Iron Man UN police show up, and he just destroys them all with this stuff. He and Flash are both after this, like, mad doctor who knows how to weaponize this vibranium in such a way. Of course, for different reasons. Flash wants to get the doctor and bring him in, or he's supposed to bring him in alive. He's supposed to get the doctor, bring him in alive so that they can question him and whatever. Jack O'Lantern wants to get him and bring him to the facility so he can continue to make the vibranium. The battle that they have fighting over him ends with Flash killing the target, the Mad Doctor, to prevent Jack from getting him. Jack O'Lantern was stealing him away, and Flash kind of reverse Gwen Stacy's him. Peter Parker heard that, he'd be bawling right now, but Flash zips out some Spidey web and gets a hold of the Doctor's head and basically snaps his neck. This is definitely a little bit closer to the PG-13 side of things. I mean, come on, it's Agent Venom. It's Venom running around with a bunch of guns, being kind of like a super spy. So, aside from that, in issue 1, we learned that Flash's temper allows Venom to take over. The more angry he gets, or the faster his heart rate goes, the more adrenaline feeds into the symbiote, and the symbiote tries to take over. We also learn about Flash being in a failing relationship with Betty Brand, and he is also kind of an alcoholic / recovering alcoholic. So a lot of dark
themes go along with that. In issue number 2, Venom goes after the vibranium like stock um, that the weapons are being made from, and he ends up, and we don't get to see how this starts, but we pick it up like in the middle of him having this brutal fight with Kraven the Hunter, as Flash is just kind of like over it, man. He's over the whole thing, and he's talking about wanting to go home to Betty and coming clean about everything, and he's sick of being beaten up, and he's sick of the symbiote suit. And as they are fighting inside of this cave, these giant bats wake up and screech, and the suit runs away from him, leaving Flash to kind of fight alone. And thankfully, there's the bats that kind of actually save him and take Kraven off. And the suit eventually returns to him, and it starts talking to him. And that's kind of when you realize Flash is over the 48 hours, and the suit is now bonding to him and telling him that it needs him, and Flash needs the suit, and because it's the only way Flash can walk. And the suit agrees to continue the mission with Thompson. So they go after the arms dealer, and weirdly enough, this is in the Savage Lands. Not exactly sure where on the planet the Marvel Universe plops the Savage Lands, but there's like dinosaurs and stuff here, and like this guy just has like random cameras. Like, I'd love to know how he decided to put surveillance cameras up. Like, oh, that tree over there looks good, let's attach one to this branch here. But because of his surveillance cameras that he has everywhere, the arms dealer, later revealed to be the crime master, has cameras in the jungle, and when the Venom suit leaves Thompson, he is able to discover Thompson's identity, and he tells Jack-O-Lantern who it is and what to do next. Issue 3, Flash and Venom raid a base holding the vibranium that is being stored and sent out to become these weapons, and they are able to secure the helicopter. That's the word I'm looking for. That contains all of it. Like, every last thing that came out of the mine is in a helicopter. And before he is able to get back to his army base, he learns that Jack-O-Lantern has Betty, and he was basically being played the entire time by Crime Master because Flash has military clearance, meaning that he can get this helicopter into New York. Not quite sure how that works either. I don't think he's questioned at all about bringing the helicopter into New York, and they're just like, oh, good. Like, there's a little bit of plot holes in here, but they're... If you were reading this for the first time, I don't know if you're picking up on it, and really, I'm not sure I grabbed that one until just this moment, that they were talking about him flying this helicopter into New York with his military clearance, and he kind of does talk to his superiors about why he has a helicopter and didn't just destroy the vibranium, but... I don't know. Seems a little bit sus. So, only having minutes to save Betty when he leaves the helicopter, because it's, they tell him you basically have 5 minutes to get to this point of a warehouse, save Betty, or she blows up. Of course, as he is swinging through New York, he runs into Spider-Man. Excuse me. And that starts like Spider-Man is also Peter Parker is also friends with Betty Brand, and they kind of have like this friend group circle. And when Betty was kidnapped, Spider-Man immediately went out looking for him. Of course, he swings into Venom, and the Venom symbiote totally takes over because it hates Spider-Man. And Flash's superiors decide that it's a good time to hit the red button. Issue 4, of course, the symbiote does not blow up, and instead one of the henchmen to the Crime Master blows up because the Venom symbiote remembered where they put it on the last host and actually dug it out of Flash without him knowing and left it on the helicopter to try and blow it up, which is incredibly smart on the symbiote part, but didn't work because one of the henchmen found it, and Crime Master pushes him off a building and he blows up as he's falling over the edge. Anyway. The main thing in this is the Spider-Man and Venom duking it out and Flash losing control, only regained after they crash into a drugstore, and he like just chows down on all of the sedatives he can find, and then he kind of gets a little bit of control and is able to tell Spider-Man where to find Betty before the symbiote takes over and tries to kill Spider-Man again. Spider-Man does save Betty, and Flash heads back to the program, and they kind of don't even tell him that they tried to detonate him. They're just kind of like, well, we had faith in you, son, and they yell at him for stuff, and Flash, they want to know why he brought the helicopter to New York instead of him destroying the vibranium as it was. And Flash does the whole, well, I thought it would be better if we had it in our hands than in the enemy's hands. And it kind of brings up the first point that we're going to see throughout the story, where Flash kind of questions his superiors and the motives of which they operate. We don't see a lot of that the rest of the first half of this book, but if I remember correctly, we see it more in the second half, and then I'm leaning forward to check. I do have volume 2. Maybe it's a little more prevalent in volume 2 than what it was in volume 1, but that does eventually happen. So Flash is able to stay on the program, but on very thin ice, and then he goes to check on Betty afterwards, and Betty is like convinced that this was all because of a story that she wrote about, I think, the return of Kingpin or something like that, about a completely different crime organization. And she kind of laughs the whole ordeal off, and Spider-Man and Venom, or in this case it was Flash Thompson and Peter Parker, sit there and kind of have this back and forth about, you know, is Spider-Man a good guy or a bad guy? And it's kind of interesting because Flash is Spider-Man's #1 fan. He's like the head of the Spider-Man fanboy club. And now he's starting to question Spider-Man, which makes Peter kind of like curious as to what's really going on. And there's a little bit of tension between the two that's very prevalent there. And then we kind of like drop the whole storyline, really. We move on to issue number 5, where Flash saves the senator's daughter from the Human Fly. Again, another villain that I know nothing about, and you don't learn much about him in this story. He basically just kidnaps people, takes them to a bell tower, uses some weird spit stuff to glue them down and let them starve until they're basically bones, and then he eats them. Like, weird, gross stuff, right? But that's not the darkest part of this issue. After Flash is able to save the senator's daughter and beat the Human Fly, he learns that his father goes missing. His mother calls him. He goes to see Betty. They have plans. Betty's in a good mood. Flash is in a good mood. Everything's happy hunky-dory. And then he finds out that his dad is out on a drinking binge, which he has not done in like 3 or 4 years, whatever it was. And Flash wants no part of it because of how his father was very abusive to him in his younger years, and mainly because of the drinking. And there's a lot of inner turmoil and all of this childhood memories of abuse, and really his own follies resurface as he ends up going through New York searching for his dad with Peter Parker, who, just like a few pages before in this trade, there was a little bit of tension between the two. And, you know, of course, Peter's able to brush all that aside to go help Flash look for his dad, but the whole issue revolves around Flash thinking about his past with his dad, how he promised his mother he would move on and try to get over the things in the past because his dad was trying to be sober, and then how a lot of the things that he'd done in his life was to seek the approval that he never got from his father elsewhere. And a lot of it is really deep. And here's where you can really see, I mean, aside from Agent Venom running around with guns and doing government operations, and Venom, the lethal protector Venom, doing lethal protecting things, this is where these stories really, really are the biggest difference, is we watch Flash talk about more real stuff. And like, Eddie Brock had his faults, but his faults were more because his one report was falsified, and then his career went down, and he just kept finding ways to dig himself deeper, whereas Flash was in bad situations and he keeps trying to find ways to get out, but things just keep getting worse for him. Or, you know, he does good for a while, but he's still not getting that father approval. Like, this is a much more deeper, that's perfect English. This is a much more meaningful, impactful story. That's the word I want. Impactful. This is a much more impactful story of character development than anything we ever get with the Eddie Brock Venom, or at least any of the Eddie Brock Venoms that I've read. Uh, and of course, all this adds to Thompson's stress of the already tangled up life that he has with constantly lying about being part of a VA program that sends him around all the time so that he can raise awareness for veterans, when in reality he's constantly hiding from Betty that he's Agent Venom and has to go on these secret missions and everything. So, to finish out the first part of this story, issue number 6 takes place during the Spider Island event. This was a event that crossed a bunch of Spider-Man books and some other characters, where everyone in New York turns into a spider or a spider-powered being. Flash is sent after a really big, huge spider that is going into New York. They don't know what it's doing, but they believe it to be. They believe that they can capture it and bring it in alive. They can find the antidote for people. It's a huge battle, and it turns out that this spider, this spider creature is a famous Avenger. I won't tell you anything more than that, but it's they found a way to get to some other superheroes to bring them into the fold, and at the end of it, Flash mimics this huge spider thing's appearance to infiltrate the enemy and spy on them and then stop them. And meanwhile, all this is going on, Flash's father is lying in bed with really bad cancer that he is not going to beat, and he is dying very soon, and Betty is with him, and she's continually calling Flash, begging him to be there for his father's passing. And I have the Spider Island trade, and I have volume 1 of this and volume 2 of this, and I don't remember if he makes it or not. So reading the next 6 issues is going to be like reading them for the first time again, because I cannot remember if he actually makes it to the hospital on time during the events of Spider Island. I remember very little from it, to be honest. But overall, looking at the first 6 issues of this, I really enjoy this Flash Venom combo. It adds a lot of depth to Flash that I have never seen before. We also see the Venom symbiote as a full-fledged hero for a change instead of a anti-hero. The back half of the first 6, so like from episode or issue 4 on, it got to be a little bit soapy with all of Flash's backstory, but from what I remember and what my hope is, that the next 6 issues take that and use that as the motives and things that happen going forward, and we don't keep going back and reverting back to all this turmoil. I want to see the Flash that you see in the first 2 issues, where he's a hero trying to be a hero for hero's sake, if that makes sense. He wants to be like Spider-Man. There's parts in this book where he is trying to do stuff, and he is constantly comparing himself to Spider-Man. And that's interesting, seeing that from someone wearing the Venom symbiote suit, because Venom hates Spider-Man. So it's weird seeing the Venom get angry and monstrous and want to lash out, and then stopping itself because the host wants to be more like Spider-Man. It puts a completely new twist on this character that I am absolutely here for. I remember really, really liking these books when I read them the first time around, and I'm enjoying them thus far through the first 6. If I were to throw these in somewhere, I would probably put a get on them. I'm not going to actually put that on a ranking and write it in my little notes where I rank stuff, but as of right now, the first 6 would be a get on it. It's a good story. It's worth everyone reading at some point, especially if you are a Venom fan, because it is such a twist on the character, which makes it complete and totally worth it to me. I love Venom. I do love Venom, the villain, when he is going after Spider-Man. I love Venom, the anti-hero, like the Lethal Protector books, Funeral Pry. I like seeing him like that and the wittiness. And then I really like this Venom as well, where Flash is a little more, like, he does do quips, but they're not Eddie Brock-like. they're not as funny as that. It's just, and sometimes there's a point in this book, I don't even remember what he says, but it's something so cheesy. And then his inner monologue, he mentions that he hates it the second it comes out of his mouth. So this is also a very self-aware character, which is completely different from the Eddie Brock character, who is very unself-aware, even in books where this story is kind of more him learning about him and the symbiote, like The Enemy Within. Still nothing like this. So for me, this is a fresh, fun take on the Venom character, and I look forward to next week when we get to finish out this trade. So until next week, guys, get out there and save the world, you bunch of heroes. I'd like to just take a couple seconds here to give a huge shout out to my Cape Crusaders, the Patreons over at Unbuckled Comics. Without you guys, I just don't feel like I would be doing this anymore. You guys are a huge part of what keeps me motivated. So a big thank you to Storm Beagle, co-host of the Retrotopia podcast, Sergeant Pickle, Jared, Big Kid 782, Because 19, Fallen Snow Kiku, Randy of the Read Watch Play podcast, Captain Alcatraz, and Captain N, the other co-host of the Retrotopia podcast. You guys are my heroes.